Let's move on to that mining story today. Bill C-300. Mining heavyweights Kinross, Goldcorp and Barrick each took turns defending their reputation this morning at a parliamentary committee meeting. Private Members Bill proposes legislation to investigate complaints against Canadian miners with operations in foreign countries. Bill C-300 would give ministers the ability to receive complaints against companies, to examine them, publish the results and notify the export development financing people if there was a problem here, and also issue guidelines. The industry, though, is fighting this tooth and nail. The author of the bill joins us now, John McKay, Liberal MP. You're here, John, to tell us why you're sticking to your guns. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Yes, the government wishes to terminate C-300 with extreme prejudice, shall we say, and the mining industry is similarly lined up. They feel that this bill is an unwarranted intrusion into their affairs. The Foreign Affairs Committee, however, has been hearing quite a different story about the activities of mining companies abroad, and some of them reflect very poorly on the activities of these companies. We've heard testimony about rapes in certain countries. We've heard testimony about displacement, abuse of human rights, intimidation of ministers, corruption and things of that nature. And it's been a bit of an eye-opener, shall we say.
To some extent, we know that there are spills, there's tailing spills in foreign jurisdictions, but sometimes these are accidents. I mean, we had Kerry Smith, an analyst from Haywood Securities, earlier on this topic. Let's hear what he had to say.
There are environmental accidents with mines. It's they're industrial operations. You do have environmental issues time to time, but by and large, they're accidents. They're not premeditated. Obviously, it's something that happens, but I think generally speaking, I don't see mining as being any more environmentally problematic than any other industrial industry, whether it's car manufacturing or any of the agriculture, whatever.
So, are we talking here about just about mishaps that afflict companies?
No, I think it's a little bit more serious than that. You may or may not be familiar with the fact that the Norwegian government withdrew financing from one of our gold companies concerning their activities in a country, and their decision was actually quite thoughtful, quite researched, and they just simply didn't believe that the mining company was prepared to enter into a plan and put the resources into cleaning up from the effluent from the extractive industry there. So I don't think these are accidents. The bill doesn't contemplate a one-time accident or things of that nature. This is serious, persistent behavior, which, to be candid about it, brings not only a reputational damage to the individual company, but it damages the industry, and even more important, it damages our reputation abroad. We had a former minister of the Argentine government telling us on Tuesday that Canada's name in Argentina is mud, and I don't think that sits too well with Canadians. So the bill is about accountability. The bill says effectively that in the event that there is a finding of non-compliance, that EDC will be notified. Surely it's not unreasonable for the taxpayer to have a little bit of accountability and transparency, and similarly for the pensioners of Canada to have a little bit of accountability and transparency. I think if maybe Canadians had seen and heard some of the testimony that we've seen and heard, they too might be concerned about some of their investments through EDC or CPP.
Critics are saying, well, how could the government investigate something that happens in a foreign country when they have no jurisdiction?
Well, it's remarkable, the Norwegian government seems to be able to conduct an investigation and make a finding. Other funds seem to be able to go to countries, conduct an investigation and make a finding. I don't think this is really all that difficult. When it boils down to is that the Canadian government would make an investment decision, if you will. It is by Canadians for Canadians. It is about whether we wish wish to be invested through EDC or CPP in this particular company. It's not a breach of extraterritoriality. We're not telling other countries what they should do or shouldn't do. We're not making commentary upon the efficacy or the enforceability of that country's laws.
But, I mean, these are high stakes. I mean, again, the industry is saying, well, if EDC yanks financing, we can't go ahead with the project, and some other company from another country will actually get the project.
I hear that concern. I'm not convinced, however, that that is as valid a concern as they would like you to believe. EDC says they have very high CSR standards, and I'm quite prepared to believe them. In which case, it's only going to catch some very outlier companies, and in that case, it may well be that the Canadian public will say to them, "You'd better go find your financing somewhere else." Because we, as a Canadian public, don't want our tax dollars or our pension dollars used for this particular activity.
We just had the head of the industry lobby group on BNN, and he said, you know, it's kind of a he said, she said. Some of these NGOs, the industry claims, stretch the truth. Let's have a listen if we could.
Many of these things are absolutely inaccurate. And when you talk about accountability, the question you have to ask is, do NGOs have accountability? What is their transparency? Do they have responsibility in terms of communications?
How would you react to that?
Yeah, well, I think it is a he said, she said at times. And what we're proposing with this modest bill is to bring this to a conclusion. Currently, what happens is that something egregious is alleged to have happened. There's demonstrations, there's waving of placards, there's newspaper articles, there's terrible headlines for the company, and then a whole phalanx of lawyers and media consultants descend on the issue, and it all goes away. And meanwhile, the damage is done. All this is a little process by which a minister of the Crown would make a finding. And the finding could well be in favor of the company. Similarly, the finding may not be in favor of the company. But it is a finding, and it does put to bed some of these he said, she said things which go on forever and ever.
John, finally, do you think this bill has any chance of passing?
Well, this bill is in tough. There's no question about it. The government has made it abundantly clear that they would like to terminate the bill with extreme prejudice. I could not possibly underestimate the influence of the mining company on Ottawa, and frankly, it's very difficult. So we're in a tight minority parliament. There is a chance that it could survive, but it will require a lot of Canadians, frankly, to start to express themselves, and I have, frankly, received a lot of mail and a lot of emails on this particular issue of Canadians making direct observations of activities in these countries, which does no credit to any of us.
John, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.